Hey there, guys. So, yesterday I went through and talked briefly about a bunch of the units that are available from the 7th anniversary unit selection. We went for about an hour. We got up through Samurai Chizuru. And now we're going to be doing part two as I continue to just give you some brief overview about the units available in the unit selection. And I decided that after I go through the whole list, I will go through and talk about the units that are not included, just to give like a whole comprehensive talk about every single unit in the game. But anyway, going back to the list where we left off, next is going to be Poppy Warrior's Prayer. Now I'm going to lump in Leftia Warrior's Prayer and Rain Warrior's Prayer in the same group. All three of these units are basically similar to the Final Fantasy I Rain or the Final Fantasy IV Lastwell. They're basically like mascot units or fan service units. They're not really units you're supposed to really put on a party. All three of these units are very, very terrible. Their damage is horrible. On the other hand, all of them bring very, very useful gear. So the TMR and STMR of all of these units is pretty nice. So most of these units have TMR or STMRs that give like 100% HP. So it's really good for bulking up your damage dealers. And that's kind of the only purpose of all three of the Warrior's Prayers units. The one that's useful is the premium Darkfina Warrior's Prayer. She's actually a good unit, but she's premium, therefore she was designed to be actually used. These units, if you pull them, you get their gear, you never put them on your party. Paladin Sylvie is, again, one of the definitely top tier units on Global. It's a global exclusive. She was one of the anniversary units last year, the good anniversary unit last year. We'll talk about Wilk in a different video. But yeah, Paladin Sylvie is honestly one of the top 5 units in the entire game still. So she does kind of everything. All the immunity buffs, resist all, mitigation to physical and magical, also general mitigation on a Magnus only for 3 turns, but it is 85% for 3 turns, which is really good for setting up your party in the beginning. 400 stat buffs, modifier buffs, AoE 100% amplify to lightning and earth, 2 charges each. 250 killers with 3 races, 5 stack mirage. She can fill your LB gauge. You kind of get what I'm saying here. She just does mostly almost everything you'd want from a support. Now there is things she's missing. She doesn't have fields. She doesn't have any personal damage of her own. That matters at least. But yeah, still, Sylvie, easily one of the best support units in the game. I personally value Melissa more than Sylvie these days. So I would say, in my opinion, Melissa is an overall better support unit. But that said, that they do different things. Melissa is more of like your dedicated all-in support, whereas Sylvie has a few things that are good for damage dealing, like modifier buffs and bigger stat buffs, etc. But both of them, Melissa and Sylvie, the two of them are standing at the top of the mountain among supports. They are both completely amazing. Ilmateal is, we talked about this in the other video, a lot of these units literally have one use only. You put them in for a very specific killer race. Ilmateal has 250 killers to, machine, plant, and stone. So if you're fighting a machine, plant, or stone, you might bring Ilmateal. That being said, Ash does have 250 stone and machine, although Ash can only cast it on one person. Ilmateal can maintain it on 4 people. So actually Ilmateal probably still would be better on a party over Ash. But again, Ash tanks at the same time, so that may or may not matter. But yeah, if you're fighting one of those 3 races, Ilmateal is probably going to be worth a party slot, depending on your party. Unless you're using like Zon or something, then things change. But yeah, if you're fighting a killer race, Ilmateal is good. Cal is a really unfortunate unit. He's like a hybrid ice SLB damage dealer. He also can do things like quadcast Blazega or Blazagia with his STMR, and it powers up, and he can cap. And overall, the damage is just not worth it. For one thing, he's an ice element. We've talked about it in the previous video. Ice is unfortunate. Ice parties are very underpowered. And Cal is a bad element. His damage is bad regardless. Really, the only time you're ever going to see Cal on a party is if the fight is hard locked to like Season 4. Then he's one of the okay Season 4 damage dealers because the pool is so small. He's like third best or something. But yeah, so other than being Season 4 locked, you'll never see Cal on a party. Yish got crowns, and after her crowns, like, she's a competent breaker. She's an 89 breaker, 160 ice in peril, does machine killer for the party, spear in peril. Yeah, so the thing holding Yish back is her element. If Yish was like fire in peril, you'd see her all the time. Like, you really would. Like, she would definitely be on, fire parties, or if she was light, you'd see her on light parties. I would say she's overall better than Lion, except for the element. The problem is she's ice, and ice is one of the weaker elements right now. So most high-end players are not running an ice party, therefore you just don't see Yish. So she's one of those units that is technically good on paper, but bad in reality because you're not running ice. And that's really all there is to it. Ricard and Wyvern got crowns recently. His crowns, did we get his crowns on Global, or are they coming soon? No, I'm pretty sure we got them already. Did we? I can't remember. We did get them. We did. We had the worm fight. Yes, we got his crowns. And that kind of demonstrates right there how irrelevant they were. His crowns did not save him. He is a Wind Dragoon. And the issue is mid exist. Like, if you're running a Wind Dragoon, you're taking mid. You're not taking Ricard. Unless we're talking like some kind of super budget run. But even then, like, why are you running Wind? Anyway, yeah, Ricard is just a damage dealer that doesn't deal enough damage. I will give special shout out to Ricard's Magnus ability. His Magnus ability gives the entire party one charge of Hide to be used whenever you want. And that can definitely be used to cheese some boss encounters. For example, the entire party could hide on like some big dangerous turn, and Ricard could jump on that turn, and the whole party is hidden. And this, on like, let's just say turn 7, the boss cast triple double Ultima, and it's supposed to be extremely damaging. You can just hide your party, and no one cares, and Ricard enables that. That said, I don't think there's ever been a fight as of yet where that has been the primary strategy, to hide the party. You may have seen that once or twice on like very specialized or gimmicky strategies, but it's never really come into play as like the meta strategy, just like an alternative goofy option. But in the future, you never know. There could be a fight where like some specific turn, bad things happen, and Ricard lets the whole party avoid that. So keep that in mind. Emperor of Palamecia is in a weird place. So Wind, as I've mentioned a few times, Wind is really good right now. And Emperor of Palamecia is, technically speaking, the best Wind breaker. He's got 89 breaks. He's got 160 in peril. Big rod in peril, if that really matters. For the most part, it doesn't for anyone currently, but it may in the future. But the thing is, like, his own damage is so irrelevant, and the fact that he does the 160 in peril, it's when something like Malphasie exists, where Malphasie is doing a 50 in peril field, and, oh god, by memory, what is Malphasie's best normal in peril? I think 135, but even so, when you're already at 185 wind in peril, going to like 210, it's certainly a damage gain. It is absolutely a damage gain, but is it worth enough of a gain to bring someone like Emperor, who is dealing like no personal damage? And that's kind of the core of the issue here. Like, you're normally going to put someone like Blades of Black Flame Reagan on your party to do the 89 breaks and then can do a little bit of personal damage, whereas Palamisha is doing like no damage. And that's really the core of the problem with these breakers from JP, is nearly all of them just don't deal any damage, and they are just dead slots. And like they break, and the break is important. You need someone to break, but like Blades of Black Flame Reagan really puts all the rest of them to shame because his personal damage is relevant. And going forward in the future, like really far in the future, someone like Prompto, the very, very recent breaker on JP, just came out. He also does decent damage. So that's the kind of breaker you want on your party, is someone that is doing the breaks and carrying their own weight. Emperor is doing like the breaks and nothing else. And that's the problem here. Also, going forward, we're going to start getting breakers that are combining roles. For example, going forward, Vanille or Galoof or Avon, stuff like that. These are breakers that, again, don't really deal much personal damage or any at all for the most part, but they're doing the breaks, the imperils, and they're bringing your field. And that's why they justify their party slot, because they're doing a lot of stuff at the same time. And someone like Vanille, who is 89 breaks, big imperils, big field, all at the same time, that kind of covers up the fact that she's not doing any of her own damage, because she's bringing enough debuffs to cover the rest of the party. Anyway, that's why Palamisha is not seen very often, because he's doing basically nothing except breaking. Kaito is a very overloaded unit who has a lot going on for him, except for damage. he's got everything in a breaker kit except for damage. No fields as well. That's actually more of a big deal lately, is fields. Fields have become really a big deal in the current game. But Kaito has a bunch of good stuff. So he has lots of perfect dispels, including auto-cast perfect dispels. In Dark Visions, he's only an 88 breaker, which is, honestly speaking, just not good enough anymore. In Clash of Wills, he is 90 to everything, 90 to all 4 stats. But the funny thing is, in Clash of Wills, that doesn't matter, because in Clash of Wills, literally you can use the Obsidian Bracer and you won't even notice a difference. Breaks just don't matter at all in Clash of Wills. High tier breaks don't matter, I should say. You could use an 80% breaker and you'll never even notice in Clash of Wills. So that's kind of the issue with Kaito, is like he's a god tier breaker in Clash, and in Clash breakers don't matter. And that's the problem. Now, the other good thing is Kaito has a lot of support stuff in his kit. Really nice stuff. He's got, in Clash of Wills, he's got 4 different killers at 200%. In Dark Visions, he's got 4 killers at 150%. He can imbue and amplify the party to water. He's got really big water imperils, only 150, so not as good as like Laguna or Lulu, but still 150 is pretty good. Oh, and he has his Magnus abilities. The Magnus abilities to remove undispellable buffs is obviously game-changing on a lot of fights. And a lot of fights, Kaito can literally change the entire encounter by being able to cheese or skip a like Mighty Guard phase that, based on JP design, you weren't supposed to be able to skip that. Kaito allows you to skip that. And that, like that all by itself, can be completely game-changing. And he's really good. Except for damage. His damage is completely non-existent. He doesn't deal any damage at all. Marilith is one of those experimental units. JP does this every now and then. They try to think outside the box, and JP tries to make something new and interesting. Sometimes it works. For example, the VV Steiner thing was a new and interesting thing JP tried, and it worked out. It was pretty interesting and pretty powerful for a long time. He eventually got power crept, but it was good for a long time. On the other hand, they tried out Marilith being able to give the party black magic with modifier buffs. The issue is it wasn't nearly strong enough. Not at all. Yeah, they needed to like add an extra zero to the modifier or something. So yeah, she can give the party Fyra and buff the party's Fyra modifiers. The issue is it's nowhere near good enough to actually run, and that's kind of the problem here. She does get crowns. I don't know if they're here already or if they're coming in the future. But the crowns they give, the thing is, when they gave her crowns, they kind of moved away from her gimmick and tried to make her just a plain old fire damage dealer with her SLB. And she never was good at that in the first place. And after crowns, she's still not good at it. So, yeah. She was an experiment. You know, I give credit to JP for trying to think outside the box with her. The issue is it was a flop, and they didn't go back and really fix the problem. When they did crowns, they should have done crowns and fixed her special unique role and let her give like meaningful damage to the party. But they didn't. They just decided to drop the whole idea and buff her SLB, which did nothing basically. So yeah. Fledgling Warrior is a physical tank, and the reason people kind of talked about him for a minute or two is he does a 30 modifier buff to Limit Burst in his shift form for the whole party. The issue is adding a 30 modifier to your entire party is not worth taking him. Even if your entire party is all damage dealers, which is not going to be the case because you're going to have a support unit, you're going to have a breaker, etc. But even if in the impossible scenario that he's buffing 5 other units with his mod buff, that's 150x modifier in total to the whole party. So you're adding a party slot to add 150 modifier when a normal unit is like 530 or higher. So you're adding like 15% of a unit by adding Fledgling Warrior. And as you can kind of realize, that's completely pointless. Like, you're never going to do that. The argument could be made, maybe you have to bring a physical tank. And if the answer is you have to bring a physical tank, my response is bring Mirage. Just don't add Fledgling Warrior. Bring someone like Sylvie or Ling or whatever and do Mirage for the party and something else. Well, not Ling, because Ling is kind of power creep too. But like Sylvie. You know, Sylvie is going to give you also modifier buffs, you know, stat buffs, LB buffs, etc. Just Fledgling Warrior. Again, it was something new JP tried. Once again, when JP experiments, most of the time they experiment with very low modifiers or numbers, and it's kind of the goofy thing is like when you put out something that the numbers and modifiers are so low, and it turns out to be not that popular because it's not strong enough. Well, the issue is they usually read that as, well, we gave you a cool, interesting, unique buff. No one's using it because it's not good, but they see it as no one's using it because we don't want this unique stuff, so they stopped doing it. Like, if they had put it out and it was worth using, people would have used it. And it would have been popular, and they could have expanded on that idea. But because they put it out and it's so weak, and then no one uses it, like they get the idea that no one likes it. Well, the reason no one likes it is because it's not good enough. You get what I'm saying? Well, I assume the viewers get what I'm saying. I just wish the devs got what I was saying. Like, if you want some, it's like the same thing happened on Global with Napi's Intrinsic. Like, they gave us Napi's Intrinsic. The numbers were so low, it was so irrelevant, and they tried to charge you for it. Well, the reason Napi's Intrinsic was so unpopular wasn't specifically because it cost 12,000 Lapis. It was unpopular because it was bad. And then people got mad about it because it was bad, and you tried to charge 12,000 for it. Like, if it was good, and it cost 12,000, people would have paid it. Like, if you had charged 12, I mean, I'm glad they didn't, but if you had charged 12,000 Lapis for Sky's Intrinsic, that would have sold like hotcakes. People would have been all over the place buying Sky's Intrinsic for 12K. No, I'm glad they didn't charge it. But that's the thing you have to do. When you're going to put forward something new, it has to be worth it first and foremost before you even consider the pricing. Anyway, I'm getting really off track here. Kyros and Ward. Kyros and Ward are, I think they got crowns too, didn't they? Did they? I don't even know. They're pretty much irrelevant. They're just a tag trainer that deals like no damage. And they've got these like really goofy self-only mitigation buffs. Like they kind of have this idea like they're going to be a provoke tank and tag chain for you, but it just doesn't work. The numbers are just not there. Their damage is very bad. Like, again, if their damage was good, people would use them, but the damage is not good, so they don't. On top of that, they're a warder unit, and we talked about warder is not in a good place. Laguna got crowns recently, and he's, again, a good breaker, technically speaking. 89 breaks, 160 water in peril. He also got big in perils for other elements. I think fire, ice, and light. 145 by memory. I'd have to look it up. I'm not gonna look it up right now. But yeah, the biggest issue with Laguna is water. Like his primary breaking is water. We've talked about it 10 times at this point. Water is not where it's at right now. In the future, water does get better, but by that time, you're getting better breakers for water. And Laguna is a good budget option. He does have double Mirage on demand, and that's very useful on a lot of encounters. So if you need double Mirage and a competent breaker, you're going to bring him. He doesn't really deal any damage at all, so that's irrelevant. But he's a good breaker. He's fine. So Rinoa and Angelo got crowns not too long ago. They do have a Dark and Peril field. But the crowns didn't fix her core issue, which is that she is heavily built around being true dual wield, except she doesn't have the true dual wield passives. And that's a problem. Yeah, she doesn't have the 8 times true dual wield cap, and while you can force double hand on her, it's very challenging because she doesn't gear super easily, and she uses lots and lots of gear slots to go true double hand. And it's not easy. It's not good to build, and her damage is just not worth it. That's all there is to it. Not to mention her best damage is Apocalypse, and Apocalypse is absolute cancer to try to cap properly. It's incredibly slow. The hits are spaced out really far. It's just one problem after another with Rinoa and Angelo, and they're just not worth it, really. They honestly aren't. Big sad. Frostblade Frievia is one of those weird units where she's got a lot of stuff in her kit. It's just never good enough. So she's got 88 breaks, which, as we know, 88 is not good enough these days. She's got a 30% or a 25% amplify field, which is not that good. Her Frost and Peril is not all that high. It's like 135, which is not super high. Her damage is absolutely laughable. Like, the only time you ever use her for damage is by giving her a vision card to replace her kit. So her damage is just a complete train wreck. And yeah, she's overall not that good. You see her every now and then when someone brings Ayaka, because Frievia kind of fixes the few problems Ayaka has, and that Ayaka can't imbue the party more than once, etc. So Ayaka and Frievia are like the duo that go together, but even that is still not that great. Yeah, Frievia is one of the duds from global exclusives. Not that good, I would say. We're gonna lump Nicole and Sakura together, the return units. Sakura and Nicole, the return, it's a cool idea, but again, this is the problem with JP, is they do these outside the box units, and the numbers are always too small to matter. Like, they're so scared to give us unusual, unique units that are good enough to worth using. So Nicole will buff up the party's Flood and Burst modifier. Same thing with Sakura. And if you're using them together on a party, they can like cross buff each other and the whole party, and then you can chain like Burst or Flood and deal some damage, but the issue, once again, is the damage is not good enough. So it's a cool idea. It's a really neat concept, but if you go through all the special setup of doing all the mod buffs, the SLB, the getting ready, and then you're chaining your quad cast flood spells, and you're doing like 60% of the damage of a plain old, use the LB and hit unit, what's the point? Like, you're going through all these extra steps for a cool, interesting, unique battle mechanic, but the damage is bad. The damage is just so freaking bad. What's the point? So once again, JP tries an experiment, and they tune the numbers so incredibly low that it's just not worth using, and then no one uses it, and you scratch your head like, why? We went through the trouble of designing a cool, unique battle mechanic, and no one's actually doing it. Well, the reason no one's doing it is because it deals dumbass damage. And that's the problem. It has to be worth using for people to use it, and it's not. Their damage is really, really bad. Axstar the Return is, now we're getting into the really bad breakers, like really bad breakers. I think his best is 88, and he's got like a 140 Dark Imperil. And that's it. He's just an incredibly bad breaker. Just like Gilgamesh, but worse in every possible way. So we're never going to use Axstar the Return. Reagan the Return, we're going to skip a little bit. Reagan the Return, exact same thing. He's light element, again, 88 breaks, 140 Imperil, useless damage. You're never going to use Reagan the Return or Axstar the Return. So Roberta and Ignitos. I mentioned them in the previous video. This is one of these standards we hold global units to because she has so much going on in her kit. In her base form, she's a tag chaining physical mage, really big fire, imbue, amplify, imperil, etc. Also has amplifies for lightning and ice for the party, although she cannot imbue them to the party. Like I said, tag chaining, mystical, what's it called? Mystical wing, mystical breath, magic breath. I forget what her tag chain is called, but it's a unique tag chain that's really, really long. I think 64 hits all by herself at Quadcast, which is really good. Yeah, perfect dispel. She can dispel the party. She can dispel the enemies. She can fill LB gauge. She can remove imperils. She's a Dragoon in the shift form, although the damage is not that good. Her damage is not good, period. It was once upon a time, but just like, Kaito and Chizuru, her damage has really fallen off pretty hard. And the only reason you use her these days is as a support unit. But her support kit is really good. It's really good. And when she came out, a year ago, her damage was really good for a long time. It just fell off kind of quickly. But yeah, still really good unit. Javi is a Season 4 unit. That kind of sums it up. With the exception of Tyvis, calling a unit a Season 4 unit is basically all that needs to be said. Is he's a Season 4 unit, which means he's got some disconnected, non-synergistic stuff in his kit that doesn't really work together. He's like a wannabe breaker, a wannabe Dark Imperil, a wannabe damage dealer, and he's bad at all of it. So there it is. Yeah, he's just got a whole lot going on in his kit. None of it makes sense. It's all numbers that are too low. Like he has 87% breaks and like a 35% dark imbue for the party. Like, it's just, all the stuff going on is just too low to matter. So big sad face on Javi. Leftia is, again, a unit that is Season 4 and not super great. So the one claim to fame she does have is the single target 100% fire amplify. And that has seen use because sometimes you really want a 100% amplify on a single target. That being said, there are better units these days. For example, Fina Dark Lineage is a better version of a fire amplify, so Leftia has been pretty much entirely power crept. Like, there's no reason to use Leftia at all these days, because if you want that single target amp, bring Fina Dark Lineage. Ninja Edge is, now he could have been, should have been, a really good Thunderbreaker. Based on JP's crowns, he was supposed to get 89 breaks, Bug Killer, 160 Imperil, etc. So he was basically the budget version of Angeal, but still really good. That being said, Global did global things, and Global skipped his upgrades. We never, ever got the crowns for Ninja Edge. Therefore, on Global, he is completely worthless. Like, his breaks never got upgraded, his Imperil never got upgraded, we never got the good killers for him. All his JP upgrades were supposed to come months and months ago. We never got them, so he is worthless. Dragoon Kane is a unit who had a lot of hype when he originally came out like a year and a half ago. Because of the hype surrounding him, Gumi even raised his prices through the roof, and that caused a bunch of drama. So much to the point that Gumi even put out a producer's letter apologizing for raising Kane's prices because he was so overhyped. He was so overhyped. Because when he came out, like, no one used him. Like, no one used him. Like, you might have seen him on, like, one Dark Visions fight, maybe. But he was just not good on Global, and then he got power crept immediately. Immediately power crept. So when he did come out, like, I do think he was used on the Dark Visions that month. People did put him on the teams. But after that, like, he was power crept and never saw again. And yeah, and Gumi, like, because they bought into the hype, they raised the prices on him, and that caused drama. They had to apologize publicly because they raised the price. Yeah, so Dragoon Kane, kind of a funny unit. Super power crept these days. You never see him. He does get crowns in the future. I think during the Final Fantasy 3 event, or 4 event, he gets crowns. And they make him better. I don't know if he's worth using at that point. I'd have to calculate. A whole bunch of the units that get crowns in JP, I don't actually do the math on to see if they're worth it or not anymore. So I would have to do the math on Kane to see if he's now worth using after his crowns. But before the crowns, very power crept. So he saw like a week of use and then died. Summoner Rydia pretty much never saw use. Yeah, her damage is exceptionally bad. It's just so freaking bad. She's an evoker that does like no damage at all. Again, she does get crowns in the future, and the crowns give her more fields, and she becomes a unit a little bit like Lena, where she does fields for both sides, the enemy side and the player side. So she can be your all-in-one field unit. That said, her damage, just like Lena, is still irrelevant. So she's not going to deal any damage for you. But she can be your all-in-one field unit. And as you've seen, we use a lot of Lena on our parties. So Rydia might see use in the future, if we get her crowns. Warrior of Dawn Dorgan is just a facepalm. He's real bad. He's so freaking bad. So his damage is just non-existent. And on top of the fact that he doesn't deal any damage whatsoever, he has those broken chains where he's a Absolute Mirror of Equity Limit Burst unit, but if you try to chain him with Absolute Mirror of Equity units, it's not going to work. It's offset. You got to have the special delay to make his incorrect frames overlay onto the proper Absolute Mirror of Equity frames. And like, if you really want to go through the headache of trying to macro that or practicing until you can do it manually, even if you do all of that, the damage is still so bad. So incredibly bad. And yeah, I don't know if he got crowns in JP. He might have. I don't know. But if he did, I don't remember. And that kind of says all it needs to be said. Like, even if he did get crowns, you still never saw him. So that says enough. But he might not have it anyway. Summoner Lena, we mentioned her a moment ago. She is basically no damage, but she has some amazing field support. She's got the 40% fire amplify field and the 25% fire imperil field at the same time, and that is really, really good. On top of that, she also has 88% brakes in her shift form. Now, 88% is not good enough, technically speaking, but sometimes, just for slot efficiency, because she's doing your fields anyway, you might fall back and rely on her brakes anyway. It's an option. But yeah, she is good for the field. Her damage is just real bad. Tulian is the Earthbreaker. So he's got 89 defense. I think his best Spirit Break is only 88, though. So 89, 88 breaks. 160 Earth in Peril. Now, Global has either skipped or delayed his upgrade. He's also supposed to have a field. JP, at this point in time, did give his Vidar an upgrade, which gave him a field. I think it's 25% Earth Amplify, or it's 30%. Either 25 or 30%, I don't know which one. But Global did not give that to us. Global has either skipped or delayed his field. I will say that upgrade did come with the Garuda Tower, which we know is delayed on Global. So when Garuda's Tower does arrive, we might get his field. But anyway, yeah, so he's the best breaker for Earth, and the problem again is you're not running an Earth party. But if you were going to run an Earth party, Tulian would be the unit you bring to break for you. Magic Mermaid Frisia is just a very power-crept unit. So all she really does is a 45% wind amplify imbue for the party. And that's basically it. So the thing here is, why would you ever take Frisia instead of taking Chizuru? Or Malphase these days? Or, well, I guess just those two. Or Aiko, now that she's out. Yeah, Frisia was just power crept by Chizuru. That's all there is to say to it. Like, that's really all she does. I think she has killers to two races, Aqua and Undead Killer, I think, by memory. But, yeah, 45 wind amp. And that's basically it. She can't even wind in peril, so that's hilarious. Yeah, really bad unit. Beach Buoy Shinju is... does she have a 150 amplify? I don't think she does, honestly speaking. Is this 30% amplify? My God. Yeah, so that kind of says it all right there. She's an Earth Mage with a 30% amplify. And as you can imagine, these days, a 30% amplify, that's all that needs to be said. Her damage is absolutely dumpster. And all she can do is a 30% amp. So, yeah. To the dumpster for you. Sniper Physalis. Again, same problem. I think her amplify is only 30% amplify. She might have more with the SLB. Let me look. The SLB. I'm sorry. I misspoke. She goes to 35% on the SLB. Talk about a big, powerful amplify right there. And yeah, that again, that says all that needs to be said. It's a mage with a 35% amplify. So you can laugh your way all the way to the bank and then put her right in the dumpster alongside Shinju. Albed Girl Riku. I don't know if it's crowns. I think it's crowns. Does she need crowns? Oh my God. I don't know. Was it a... I'm not going to stop and look it up. But basically, she got an upgrade that made her a lot better. I think it requires crowns. I don't remember. Either it does or it doesn't. I don't know. But she got upgraded to where she does a 50,000 point barrier on her SLB. And that's really good sometimes. If you really need a barrier. There are better units to do barriers. For example, Abigail does a 100,000 point barrier. But Albed Girl Riku can do it every 3 turns, whereas Abigail's like every 6 turns or something. But yeah, and that's kind of all she really does. She does Light and Lightning, Imbue, Amplify, Imperil, Machine Killer. Like, she's got a few things in her kit, but really the only thing you're going to bring her for is if you absolutely must have that big barrier, then she can be worth it. Other than that, like, even with that, you're still going to bring like Abigail or Sylvie or something for a barrier instead. Maeve is one of those big troll units from Global. So Global put out Maeve, who at first glance looked like a good dual cover tank. But Maeve has so many problems going on in her kit. So many problems. And then this is going to trigger people that are like Maeve fans. And I apologize for that, but I am about to tear into Maeve. So she has so many things wrong with her. First of all, the biggest, most absolute troll move in history is by the developers. If you are using Maeve's Trust passive, meaning if you're activating her TMR or STMR, every single time you Brave Shift her, she overrides her cover. It replaces the cover, probably with one you don't want. Also, even if it's with the cover you do want, it's with a 40% mitigation cover. It replaces it at the end of the turn. You can't even override this. So every time you Brave Shift her, she becomes squishy as hell if you're using her Trust Mastery gear. Now, you can skip the Trust Mastery gear, which means you're also losing her Trust passives. And that's like a big deal. A lot of her bulk is built into this. For example, 100% double hand, some immunities, etc. And then the shift form, kind of the same thing. 100% spirit double hand. Not to mention her Trust Mastery and stuff is pretty good. Like the Boar Hammer, you want to use this on her, but you can't because if you Brave Shift her, it screws everything up. Now, that being said, you could keep her in the same form and never Brave Shift, meaning you're losing the ability to dual tank. So now she's just a single type of tank. Now, if we go into the single type of tanking, it becomes even worse. You want to know why it becomes worse? Because things like her LB don't give any mitigation. And then in her kit, her mitigation is for self only, 75%. For the party, the only mitigation she has is 50% on a cooldown. That's actually the wrong one. Where's the cooldown? Wow, here it is. 50% general mitigation on a cooldown. So for one thing, it'll get dispelled and you lose it forever. Second thing, even if it doesn't get dispelled, it's only 50% mitigation. That is so freaking bad. 50% is like bottom tier 3-star level. And that's the best she can do for your party. It's so freaking bad. Like, Maeve is one of the biggest troll units ever. So she only saw use for a single Clash of Wills fight. It was like the Hydra, I think it was. And that's because all of her racial mitigation. She does have racial mitigation for Dragon and Beast, I believe, I think. And they lined up for that fight. So for that specific fight, she was useful. And then you never saw Maeve again because she was just power crept. And she's just bad. Like, if anyone on Global desperately needs crowns other than Wilk, it would be Maeve. Maeve needs crowns so badly to fix her problems. So Wilk needs them more than her, though. But yeah. And of course, Global being Global has done nothing for her. No intrinsic, no crowns, no enhancements, no upgrades, nothing. Global is happy to let Maeve just sit there in the dumpster alongside Shinju. Olivera is a very strange unit. So he's a unit that, on paper, in theory, has high damage potential. And the reason for that is his limit burst. His limit burst is, as you can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a 4-part limit burst, meaning any kind of modifier buff will apply 4 times to Olivera. So if you're going to, for example, use the Cool Smile card, that adds a 200 modifier to him. If you're doing Melissa with her plus 60x modifier single target, that's a 240x modifier. If you're doing something like Sylvie with her plus 30x in Clash of Wills, that's a plus 120. So with all these modifiers buffed together and all stacked on Olivera, you're getting to something like 1200x LB mod in Clash of Wills. And that sounds kind of amazing. The issue is you're building like the entire Exodia comp all to buff up Olivera, and you're neglecting the rest of your party for this. Also, Oliveira does not gear well at all. So, like, there's like one or two races that he can kind of gear for, but everything else, trying to gear him for the proper build and maxing killers is like not going to happen because he has the worst passives in history. Yeah, so that's kind of him. He also has the Brave Shift form, which is the tag chaining, MP scaling, and even with things like the Dazzling Demoness card and Oliveira getting to like 20,000 MP, it doesn't really hit very hard, honestly speaking. So it's kind of whatever. It just doesn't hit hard enough. And also the cherry on top, the best of all, Oliveira, as you notice here, does not have any black magic synergy whatsoever. So while you could, in theory, give him the Meteor Materia and let him do like 30% Meteor on his 20,000 MP, he can't, because he can't use black magic, which is just a big sad face. So yeah, Oliveira, fun unit, has some interesting theoretical applications on paper, but in reality it never works out for him, because just in reality his damage, even with all the setup and the cool flashiness, just doesn't really pay off in the end. So yeah. Pause is a unit who used to be the butt end of jokes. These days it's Sabin when you're trying to talk about the worst unit in the game. It used to be Pause. Not quite so much anymore, because now she's just forgotten, period. She's a light mage SLB unit. Her stats are bad. Her damage is bad. Her amplify is bad. She doesn't gear well. That's all there is to it, really. She's just a mage that deals bad damage, and there's nothing more to say about it. Just, put her in the dumpster alongside the rest of the crew. Roka is a Earth support unit. Did we get her crowns on Global? I don't think we did. I don't think we got her crowns yet. Yeah. So anyway, she has the time magic stuff where you can reduce cooldowns. For the most part, that's not specifically relevant. Every now and then you'll see a niche case use, like for example making Graph deal damage sooner, or making 2B, not 2B, making A2 use Hateful Blade more often. That said, most of the time you're going to take Melissa instead, not Roka. But, Roka does have 45% Earth Amplify, some Stone Killer. After her crowns, she does get 100% Earth Amplify. Also, she gets an Earth Imperil field. It's kind of strange the way she got the Imperil field and Tulian got the Amplify field. You would think they'd reverse that, to where Roka got the Amplify and Tulian got the Imperil. But that's just not the case. But those are with crowns. We don't have the crowns yet. We may never get them. And then even so, her Amplify is single target. So very, very often, if you really want an Earth support unit, you're taking Sylvie. And Sylvie does AoE 100 Amplify, plus a lot more stuff. Roka is 300 stats, Sylvie is 400 stats, etc., etc. Sage of Thunder Sakura. So basically, she is a really good Thunder support unit. 50% Imperil field. It does require crowns, but as we mentioned in the previous video, the new Sakura kind of replaces her. So if you have the new Sakura, you're going to use her. But if you don't, this one is still decent. Like, it's still good enough. And I personally still use Sakura on a lot of Thunder fights, because a 50 Imperil field is a really big deal. Yeah, it's really good. Ice Reaper Kurasame. So he did get crowns not too long ago. He's still terrible. And again, the problem with these older DPS is the Amplify. Like, either you have a 150 Amplify or you don't. And if you don't, like, that almost immediately sends you to the dumpster. Now, sometimes there are exceptions. For example, like Mid. Mid also doesn't have a 150 Amplify, but Mid's personal damage and her field makes up for it. Kurasame does not have that luxury. He doesn't have a field. His personal damage is still terrible. It's just, he's a damage dealer that doesn't deal damage. That's all there is to it. Bulwark and the Melodic Mascots. So Bulwark is a support unit. Honestly speaking, I don't think Bulwark support is all that great. And this might be controversial for me to say, but the problem is his mitigations are very low. He only has 1 stack Mirage. His killers are only 150, whereas most killers these days are like 250. His mitigations, I already said that they're low. He doesn't feel that much morale. Like, Bulwark is not super great. So the only claim to fame you can really give them is Bulwark does, in Clash of Wills only, have a permanent uptime 60% wind amplify for the party. And that's decent-ish. But still, like, I don't know. Even the most recent Clash of Wills, Pedarge, where Bulwark literally had the proper element and all 3 of the killers. I think it was Demon, Bird, and Fairy by memory. And Bulwark had literally all 3 killers for that clash, and the best element for that clash. It was a wind boss. You still didn't see Bulwark that often. Now, I do know a lot of people use Bulwark, but in my personal opinion, I think Bulwark was not worth it, even on the clash that literally lined up in every possible way for Bulwark. All 3 killers, and it was wind element, and I still don't think Bulwark was worth taking, because he's just power crept. Like, he doesn't do anything good enough, and that's the problem here. That's how I feel, at least. So there you go. Kresnik is, again, a unit that once upon a time was absolutely amazing. He was the king of the hill for morale fill. He's still really good for morale fill, but other than filling like less morale than Melissa, he's not doing a whole lot for your party. Like, he does have the 3 turns of Holy Imbue for the enemy, so he can buy you 3 turns of physical immunity. He does still heal the party. He does all the immunity buffs. He does some morale fill. He can fill a lot of LB gauge with a quad attack build. Like, he's got uses. He's a good unit still, and I do still use him every now and then. But, like, really the biggest issue here is you don't really use healing in Brave Exvius anymore. Like, you don't ever take a unit to heal the party. You know what I'm saying? Like, if your party needs healing, you're getting that from, like, the counterattack of Sylvie, or the counterattack of Abigail, or you're getting that from, like, Pure Lotus regeneration, or you're getting it from Phoenix Synergy. You never, ever add a unit to your party specifically for the purpose of, I need to top off my party's health. That's always a side effect of a different unit these days. And that's Kresnik's main role, is healing your party. And we just don't need that anymore. You just really don't need that. And that's the biggest thing. So really, all he does is fill morale gauge, and Melissa does it better. And that's kind of the reason you don't see Kresnik that often. Doma Samurai Cyan. So this is a unit who got crowns this week. Gold crowns. So we went back to the old system. That's a whole nother drama we talked about in other videos. But even after his crowns, he is still way, way down there on the chart. He is so low on damage. And yeah, that's really all he does is damage, and it's bad. So what more can I say? And it's going to cost you 4 gold crowns. Gold crowns! To do that bad damage. So have fun with that. Yigni is a unit who, for a short period of time, Yigni did deal good damage. You even saw Yigni in some Dark Visions fights back in the day. Like, back in the day, Yigni was okay. The damage was fine. The damage was respectable, even good in some cases. But the issue with Yigni is his damage fell off extremely quickly. Like, he lasted maybe a month and a half, and then you never saw him again. And the core of the problem here is he's like a true dual wield unit, and he doesn't do his own weapon in peril. He also doesn't have the true dual wield cap. So if Yigni had a 8 times true dual wield cap, if Yigni did his own like 45% dagger in peril, well, truth be told, the damage would still be bad. But it would at least be something at that point. But Yigni doesn't have all that. Not to mention Yigni's magic stat is very bad. So now we're getting to the point, like the way back in the day, when units didn't have flat stats, period. So I think Yigni gets 500 stats at EX3. Other than that, no flat stats. So your decked out whale mode Yigni is going to have, like, I don't know exactly. I'm just going to throw out a number. Something like 8,000 magic. Now, I could be wrong here. You know, someone might link me a build with their like 10,000 point magic Yigni. But the point is, it's not high when your standard is like, you know, Richt or Ibarra with after a leader skill, something like 18,000 magic or attack power. Yigni with the leader skill is going to be like 11 or 12,000, if that. And then you have all the other problems. No 8 times cap. Can't really gear for double hand worth a damn at all. No weapon in perils. Not to mention, on top of all that, Yigni is a pentacaster. And pentacast, like, no one does that except for Tiana. So who's going to even chain with Yigni to his highest potential? And the answer is no one. So a lot of problems there. General Celeste, or General Seals. I'm going to call her General Seals for old time's sake. Deal with it. So General Seals, she, at the current time, is not very good. She's got Dragon Killer, a little bit of ice support. Other than that, she is extremely squishy, and her only good mitigation is on her Limit Burst, and it's a 1-turn duration. Meaning, in order for her to maintain her mitigation, you have to LB every single turn, which is ridiculous. That being said, Seals does get crowns in the future based on JP. JP fixed a lot of her problems. JP made her mitigations a 3-turn duration, so you could, you know, do other stuff except for LBing every single turn. I think they even raised it to 85. No, they didn't. Did they? I don't know. It might still be 80. I don't know. But the point is, JP did make her better. JP also buffed her shifted LB, which brought it to, by memory, I think 350 stats and 300 LB damage, which is real nice. It made her a really good ice support unit or a competent tank in the base form. That being said, if you've used Seals before, you do know that her gearing is abysmal. She has really bad passive stats, really low base stats, basically no flat stats. So even in a fully whaled out build, you're looking at something like 35 to 40,000 HP and like 7,000 spirit. Comparing that to like Abigail at like 65,000 HP and 15,000 spirit, it's a big difference. It's a big difference. So she's, even after crowns, still not the greatest magical tank. Usable, and like I said, same thing I said during the Ashe thing. Like, you don't need Abigail levels of mitigation to tank most fights. Most fights, Seals will tank totally fine. But even so, you know, on a hard-hitting fight. For example, if you took Seals to the Evil Princess trial, that's a trial that does really brutalize your tank. I would not be surprised if Seals dies during the Evil Princess trial, trying to tank it. Could be wrong here, and we'll hopefully see on Global at some point. Anyway, me calling her Seals was just for nostalgia. That's what I used to think of her as name before I was corrected. I do realize her proper name is Celeste, so now we're going to go back to calling her General Celeste. But anyway, so once again, part 2 has apparently approached the 1 hour mark. We're still not through the list. We've still got a bunch more of these units to go, and then we've got the premium units I want to go through. Also, we've got the time-limited units I want to go through. Like, I'm going to go through all the units. So we've still got like a lot of this stuff. For example, the premium banner, I'm going to go through and talk about. And then we've also got the festival banner, or the limited banner. I'm going to talk about all the limited units as well. So we've got a lot of stuff. This might be like a 4 or 5 part video series. But that was part 2. So we'll talk more in the next one. See you in a bit.